Welcome to CBIA's Leadership Series. I'm Dan Longo, First Vice President, Commercial Lender at Liberty Bank. I specialize in middle market lending to business owners. Liberty Bank is a mutual savings bank with over $7 billion in assets, with loan offices throughout Connecticut and Western Massachusetts. We're very proud to be the series sponsor today. Today's topic about your organization's culture is very timely, with employee retention and talent acquisition on front of everyone's mind. And I believe you're really going to enjoy our speaker today. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Robin Imbrogno, CEO and founder of the Human Resources Consulting Group.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. And thank you, CBIA, for the opportunity to be here today. It's always a pleasure. As Dan shared, HRCG is a Connecticut-based organization, women-owned, proudly. We've been around for over 30 years and gratefully actually a client of Liberty as well. So, it's interesting, Joe and Natasha had asked me to do this program several months ago, and I asked them if I could have an opportunity to think about it. And in my mind, I quietly thought, gee, is there another topic they could ask me to speak about? Because workplace culture is a real challenge for us as well. And I marinated on it for a bit and thought, maybe it is a good thing for us to talk about, because we ourselves were spending a tremendous amount of time and energy as a leadership group talking about culture in the Human Resource Consulting Group. As many of you, we were suffering from the pains of COVID over the last several years and thinking about how we were going to rebuild the organization and how we were going to get to the next phase of who we were and who we needed to be, and trying to figure out sort of where the pains were coming from and how to get ourselves somewhat coalesced again. So I was like, gee, do I really want to be a subject matter expert when we're feeling these culture pains ourselves? And I agreed to do it because I knew that that would make me double down to get to the root cause for us. So with that, I embarked on a journey and worked with some of my peers at Vistage. And for those of you who may or may not know Vistage, Vistage is a peer advisory group. I have been a member for almost 15 years, and we have programs that help us become better in different areas. So I was like, we have to have someone that's an expert at building culture, especially now in this new post-COVID world. And I spent weeks, if not months, looking for someone to support and help our organization, and came to the sad realization that I was probably at the same place as many other entrepreneurs and business leaders and HR professionals. So I started a blog at Vistage and said, who else is sitting where I am? And after creating quite the firestorm, I came up with lots of resources, did lots of reading, went back to my leadership group, and ended up with the agenda that I'm going to share with you today. And hopefully you'll end up with at least a couple of pieces of information, and would like to share with you some of the stories that we've learned over the last several months. And hopefully you don't have to go through some of the same labor pains that we went through. So with that, today in the next hour or so that we have together, would like to talk with you about culture, what it is and why it's important, high performing cultures, where to start, why people leave, why people stay, hopefully the right people stay, how to close that gap, what employee experiences are, what EX is, the new term, what that data tells us about employee experience and what it doesn't tell us, what employment strategies need to be and could be for hybrid and remote workers. And then we'll close perhaps with a couple of resources for you all, and hopefully together you can try out a couple of new things that will make it a little bit less painful. So why is this important to you and why should you care? Well, I asked Natasha to do a little bit of legwork for me, and I asked her to find out what you all look like as a group. And I guess over a couple hundred of you registered for today. And I asked the question in advance, how many of you specifically work remotely? How many of you are working hybrid? And about half of you answered the question. And this is fairly consistent with what we see in our client base as well. And it appears that about 2/3 of you are working in the office, and about 1/3 of you are working either remote or completely hybrid. And that's important because the strategy for helping manage this in-office / hybrid workforce is unique in and of itself and creates a whole new level of challenge for us. And it has its own unique opportunities for employee engagement and creates a whole new set of challenges for employees as well, and puts more pressure, quite frankly, on your values for culture. So we're going to take a look at those as well. So let's take a look at what culture is. So I purposefully pulled something from years ago, not to date myself, but more because I was interested when I was doing the preparation for this. I was like, okay, so I started my career back in the 80s. What did culture look like then? So when I had my HR certification originally, I was a student of Adler and Jelnick, who said culture is a set of taken for granted assumptions or rules. So rules that have shared cognitive approaches. And I thought to myself, okay, a set of rules for an organization. Well, that would make sense because back in 1986, I was doing training at the time, management development training. And when I did training back then for a group of lenders, and Dan, you'll appreciate this, I would do training and then my male, pretty much back then all lenders were men, they would go into the building that I was doing the training in and they'd be able to have lunch. And I, as a female, wasn't able to go have lunch with them because the training building that we did lunch in was just for men. But that was a taken for granted rule or expectation. And that was okay back in 1986. And that culture, that was the culture that was shared and that was okay. Today, SHRM suggests that culture is a set of shared beliefs and values, and for the most part, they're deeply entrenched values that ultimately shape employee perceptions, behaviors, and understanding. And those behaviors and perceptions are established by leaders and then reinforced by a variety of methods and communicated by those leaders. So big change, obviously a big shift from 1986 to today. And certainly I don't think anyone could get away with leaving me in the training room today, but that's today, that was then. But now I'd like to hear your thoughts about what you think culture is, and probably different than many training programs. But I'd like you to get out your phones if you could. And if you don't have your phone handy, you can just pull up a URL or have your internets ready and handy. But I would like to hear your thoughts about what you think about a positive or healthy workplace culture. So there's a QR code on your screen. I'd like, if you could, to bring out your phone and scan that QR code. And I'd like you to think about what 3 words are that comes to your mind when you think of a positive or healthy workplace culture. And together, we'll all have an opportunity to see what everyone has in their mind's eye when you think about healthy or positive workplace cultures. So just take a moment if you would. If you don't have a QR reader on your phone, you can go to slido.com and put in that code 3773481. It'll take you just a moment to do that. And this way we can all share your thoughts as you're doing that. I'll give you just a moment to do that. All right, let's see. So this is how you all would define a healthy or positive workplace culture. So for where you see those words that are larger than others, that means many of you feel that a healthy or positive workplace is respectful. And some of you said respect or respectful. So obviously that's critical for you. Supportive, teamwork. So many of you felt that way. Inclusive, engagement, trustworthy or trusting, teamwork, collaboration in many different ways, communicative, good communication, open communication, shared values, diverse, survivable. Wow, if there's anything we've learned in the last few years, it's survivable, socially responsible, genuine. We see that word teamwork in many different ways. Having shared visions, productive, supportive, shared values, again, friendly, tone, interesting. I wish we could spend even more time on the word tone. That's great. Happy, engaged. That's awesome. Safe. It's a wonderful word. Safe, vibe. Thank you all for sharing that. And I will share this back with you so that you all can have this as well. But those are all fabulous words to describe what a positive or healthy workplace culture means. So when we look at this and we think about the last 3 years, it's sort of like, wow, you know, the light that came with the train behind it, it's been incredible, right? In February of 2019, which I guess technically is 4 years now, did anyone really think what we were about to encounter 4 years ago when we were there? I certainly didn't. I remember my last quote unquote business trip that I was on that began the beginning of what we now know as the COVID world and how that affected all of our worlds. And for where we are then to now, it's provided us with a whole new perspective. And quite honestly, for those of us in leadership positions or in HR roles, we now have to take the opportunity to sort of pause and plan and pivot and think about how does this affect our workplace, the culture that we've built, what needs to change, and what's impacted our people, and has it impacted at all the shared vision that we've had for what is known as our organizational culture. So when we think about those healthy and positive work environments, and we think about all of the things that have impacted what that shared vision looks like, and those words that you all have just put up on the screen, and you think about the moments that we've been through, 2019 going into 20, we had many people leave our organizations for a variety of reasons. People left because they were either unable to work, because they were afraid to, unable to work because we didn't have jobs for them, unable to work because they weren't considered essential workers, or they couldn't leave their families because no one was home for them. We had questions like, are we going to have people vaccinate or not vaccinate? Or should we, or could we? We had people who questioned their career choices, their educational choices. We had people who went from living in homes in the Northeast to wanting to downside and live in apartments in in cities, or people living in cities to deciding they wanted to go live in suburbs or urban areas or non-urban areas, or going from the East Coast to the West Coast to the Midwest. And there were changes of all shapes and sizes. People wanted less, people wanted more, people wanted nothing, people wanted everything. And those changes impacted organizations as much as they impacted individuals. We saw people resign in droves, and then we saw organizations fail for a multitude of reasons. And now as organizations, we're looking at, what do we do? Well, how do we keep the people that we have? How does this impact the culture that we have? How do we continue on as businesses? And we think about, how do we keep the people that are left? And what do people want? Well, we know a few things. We know that people now want, having lived through the Great Resignation to what's now being known as the Great Retention, we know that people want flexibility. They want development. They want to connect. They want to connect with purpose, with the purpose of the organization. They want to feel and having an understanding that their well-being is important. And you guys just identified this on the slide that you all put together. They want to be incented, but not in the way that incentive used to mean total compensation. Incentives have different values and meanings to them now. It's not just about dollars. Dollars are certainly important. We saw that. We saw wage scales go completely, the trajectory went up. We've participated in wage salary surveys through ERI for years, where wage surveys were updated annually. Now they're updated every 6 weeks. So wages are one thing, and certainly there's been wage inflation, but wage incentives are just one piece, and retention isn't just about wages. So all of these changes that we've dealt with, how do we manage all of these things together, and how do we keep people? Because it's not just about all of these things, and it's not just about making sure that you can keep the person that you have. It's about making sure that the person that you have isn't going to go to the 4 people or 4 organizations that are next to you, because in addition to all of the other challenges that you have a competitive issue. There aren't enough people in the workforce with the skills, knowledge, and abilities to do the work anymore. We have a math issue. It's that simple. When the beginning of the pandemic began, and we started seeing a labor shortage, people made assumptions that it was just people leaving Connecticut. And everyone now understands that the problem had nothing to do with people leaving the Northeast or leaving California or leaving other parts of the country, that we truly have a labor shortage, that there just aren't enough people. So now you as an employer have to make sure that your culture connects with people at the deepest level, because you're competing against every other corporation to make sure that whatever your value proposition is as an organization is going to win the person over and keep the person you have, because everyone else can offer someone something that the other company next to you can offer as well. So a culture of retention, where do you see it? How do you feel it? What does it look like? You see it in leadership behaviors. You also see it in communication styles. You see it in organization technology infrastructures. You see it in distributed messages. You see it in corporate celebrations, and you see it in behaviors that either align and sometimes don't align with organizational values. So leadership behaviors where leaders are engaged in organizations, and communication styles that are open and transparent, and organization technology infrastructures that are built to engage people, where you can use things that will make sure that people who are working in offices and outside of offices feel like they're working together as one. And internally distributed messages, again, that are open and make sure that people feel connected. Celebrations that aren't just built for the folks that are working door to door or can walk out of their office and feel like they can walk into someone else's office, but that someone can walk into an office of someone who might be in a different state or might be 50 miles away. Behaviors that align with the organizational's value, that connects at a purpose with the individuals that work for that organization. And all of those characteristics together, similar to the ones that you've identified, create high performance work cultures. And purpose is critical because people need to understand the why. Values are practiced. People need to understand that people are going to be held accountable and that they can feel and align with the priorities. These characteristics that we're looking at now make people understand at the highest level of engagement and understand why and how a high performance culture can work with and for them. They understand that something isn't going to get done that isn't necessarily mean if something isn't meaningful to the customer, that it doesn't need to get done. So we're not going to just do something because we've always done it that way. We can get rid of it if it doesn't make sense to do it that way anymore. People's roles match up with their passions. There's a saying, you know, the right seat in the right bus. I don't know if any of you have heard of something called EOS or accountability charts, but making sure that people's skills, knowledge, and abilities, what they want to do, actually match up with their jobs. Because someone is only going to do a great job if they're doing something that they're great at. So they can do something and they can do it better if it's something that they really want to do. And we've seen a lot of that in the last couple of years. People are leaving jobs that they've been trained to do forever to go do something that their passion is engaged with. People growing and flourishing without being dependent on leaders because they feel empowered and engaged. And with all of that becomes the bottom line. And the bottom line results are achieved because people feel committed to the overall success of the organization. And some of you may have heard this term, and I hope that you have, but at the end of the day, no matter what you've planned for from a strategy standpoint, your culture will always eat strategy for breakfast, because without having a positive, healthy culture, no plan, no strategy will ever survive it. And that is a saying from Peter Drucker from years and years ago, and it is held true to today, because an unhealthy culture will never survive no strategy, no matter how well built it is. So I see that there are some questions in the chat, and I'm going to go back to them for a moment. If I could, if there's some questions about, so there's just some questions about the, we are using that system. Okay. I guess I don't have to answer any questions, but please know you're more than welcome to put questions in the chat. So let's talk about how you create these kinds of systems to help create a healthy culture within your environment. How do you start? So we're going to take a look at very recent, in October of this past year, HR report that talked about how to build and what people want in terms of an organization to feel engaged and a healthy environment. First and foremost was talent retention in terms of keeping people engaged for the great retention, so to speak. Employee experience, also known as EX. Showing care and support, and looking at the data. So the outcomes of this HR report in terms of the 4 things that you can do, these are the 4 building blocks, if you will, that were analyzed and determined to be 4 critical areas of impact that you could have to help to build a healthy culture for your organization. And we're going to look at some of the data, if you will, that people shared about what's important to them and how it impacts these 4 areas. So first, let's take a look at why people leave. Why did people leave jobs? Salary, certainly in the last couple of years, was a big issue, still continued through 4th quarter of 2022. Better benefits. A third of the people left for better benefits. 25% for flexibility. 21% left for culture. They didn't like the culture that was there. But interestingly enough, when you get below culture, 21% left for growth. Growth is part of culture, feeling that there's a part of learning opportunities within the organization. Feeling recognized and valued, also part of culture. 17% management style, also part of culture. 14% being contacted by a recruiter. 12% tasks didn't match their job description, so doing something they didn't feel that they were engaged to do. 10% being laid off or furloughed. It happens. 9%, they didn't like the people that they worked with. Happens. 8%, company wasn't doing well. That's why people left. Let's look at why people stayed. This overwhelmed me. 32% of people stay in their jobs because of the relationships that they have with their coworkers. So a third of people stay because of the people that they work with. So think about your hybrid and remote employees. So if a third of you are working in remote environments or have employees that are working in remote environments, think about what that says about your engagement strategies for remote environments. And we're going to talk about that more in a few minutes. 17% benefits, 16% pay. Incredibly interesting, right? For those of you who've been around for a bit and may have come up in HR, trained in HR or trained in management, you may remember a concept called about pay anyway, or about minimum benefits, that people need to have a minimum level of pay to be able to feel safe, right? But once they have that, more of something isn't going to necessarily make them feel better. This confirms that if they have what they need a minimum level, but everybody else is offering benefits today. And your competitors are also offering, obviously, competitive salaries today. People have to. Everybody's offering competitive salaries today. So people aren't necessarily leaving because of salary. They're staying because of relationships. 17% are staying for work. Only 8% are staying because of their boss. 7% are staying because of their culture, which is completely in contrast to what we're talking about. And 3% are staying because of their growth. So how do you change that? How do you change the narrative? How do you close that gap? Obviously, making sure minimally you're paying market. You have opportunities to improve communication, provide flexible environments, invest in training, provide engagement programs, offering more paid time off, offering any kinds of additional perks that you can, reacting to employee feedback. We're going to be talking about feedback, employee feedback specifically in a little bit. Never, ever ask for feedback unless you plan on doing something with it. Enhancing transparency and communication amongst leadership and employees. Diversity and inclusion, still important, but the gap is becoming smaller, and offering additional pretext benefits. So let's talk about employee experience, also known as EX. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of this as we head into 2024. Employee first day experiences, having outstanding employee onboarding experiences, reevaluating promotion processes. I most recently came across an employer that still had a 2-year process for job posting out of a current job. People don't want to wait 2 years anymore. They don't want to wait a year. If there's something that they want to do differently and they have the skills, knowledge, or ability, don't lose that employee because we haven't revisited a process, or we have something that might be not visited in a while. Don't lose that to a competitor or to another organization down the street. Tuition assistance, loan forgiveness, tuition loan forgiveness, all of those things, creating a place to share new ideas and initiatives at all levels. It used to be a box in the lunchroom. Today it's a virtual box, but creating any process or methodology for people to share. Improve communications at all levels, whether you're using Slack channels or channels on Teams, but allowing people to share and communicate in ways that you haven't had to think of before. The phone, if you will, in the office is no longer the method of communication. It can't be any longer. People are chatting, people are texting. So find those methods and work through those methods. Use your technology, your HRIS systems, your HCM technology systems. Support and encourage feedback mechanisms, employee engagement tools, again, using your technology. You have to show support and care by listening. And burnouts, when we talk about the great resignation, the people who were left, the people who are left, have been left and quite frankly left behind piles and piles and piles of work for the people who are still there doing that work. The challenge that left is that people are left behind to do the work. They're exhausted, they're burnt out, they're fried. Listen to them. 50% just about shared that they are burnt out. They need paid mental health. Somebody very in my close circle shared with me no more than 2 weeks ago, shocked me that they were going to be taking a paid mental health leave. I was incredibly surprised, and it was because they were burnt out. Almost 40% are asking for resources to minimize the risk of burnout. 35% are looking for policies to address responding to work after hours. When you think about how we've become a global society, people who are working, again, remotely in a hybrid environment, 7 days a week, have offices at home. Even if they're working in the office, they have devices they're taking home and taking calls at 7 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning. And maybe that was okay 4 years ago, but perhaps after all of what the last 3 or 4 years have shown us, 35% of the folks are saying it's not okay anymore. 27% want more wellness resources, and 23% want assistance in managing their own performance. They want more learning, more emerging leader programs, mentoring opportunities. They don't have to be within your own organization, especially if you're a small business. They could be another small business. They don't have to be a competitor. It could be in a completely unrelated business, maybe another local organization. My daughter happens to work for a hospital in New Hampshire. She's in in a health equity position. She's the only person in that role, leadership role. So someone in another hospital that's 200 miles away is her mentor, and she's mentoring someone who's 500 miles away. So you think out of the box where you can find people to help mentor the folks within your organization, create and facilitate those opportunities, as well as leadership coaching. And again, some of these can be formal, some of them may not be formal. Creating a learning culture is going to be critical because the people in your organization are looking for them. They're looking for ways to upskill and reskill. They're looking for training opportunities that are tailored to them, to their individual skill sets, and they're looking for change, and they're looking to build and looking to grow. We're going to talk more about work-life balance in general. Somebody brought up the word safe before, and we're going to talk a little bit about safe. I have actually a quick video that I would love to share with you, but talking about work-life balance and making sure that people have met those needs. We're going to look at this in a couple of different ways, but 35% of the people who participated in the survey are still looking for better ways to find that balance. Still looking almost 27% for more flexible working arrangements. 27% looking for more employer feedback, more frequency. 23% looking for prioritizing employee engagement. So again, we still haven't met those needs yet. This survey is only 5 months old. So now for those of you who may know this next gentleman coming up, Simon Sinek, he's an inspirational leadership speaker. He is very well known. In this particular one, he's talking about psychological safety and how critical it is in overall creating a workplace culture that is successful. And again, there's about two to 3 minutes, so I hope you enjoy this.
Yeah, when we talk about safe, we're talking about psychological.
Sorry about that.
Right, yeah. And you can be psychologically safe and still trip over a point. That's right. Yeah. So it's a great story. It's I had a business trip to Las Vegas a bunch of years ago, and the client was very generous and put me up at the Four Seasons, which is a lovely hotel. And the reason it's lovely is not because of the fancy beds. Any hotel can buy a fancy bed. It's because of the people who work there. That when you roam the hall and somebody says hello, you get the distinct feeling that they wanted to say hello, not that they were told to say hello. You know, we're highly attuned social animals. We can tell the difference. And your idea of being the Nordstroms is like people can tell the difference whether they're forced to give good service or they want to give good service. Anyway, they happened to have a coffee bar at the Four Seasons in Las Vegas. And one afternoon, I went and bought myself a cup of coffee. And the barista working that day was a kid named Noah. Noah was funny and engaging and charming. And I stood there for far too long just to buy a cup of coffee. And so, as is my nature, I asked Noah, do you like your job? And without skipping a beat, Noah said, I love my job. Now, in my line of work, that's significant because like is rational, right? I like the people, I like the challenge, I get paid well, I like my job. Love is emotional. It's a higher order connection. Like, do you love your wife? I like her a lot, right? It's different.
Right.
It's not the same, right? So Noah said, I love my job. So immediately my ears perk up. This kid has an emotional connection to his job. So I followed up and I said, can you tell me specifically what the Four Seasons is doing that you would say to me, you love your job? And without skipping a beat, Noah said, throughout the day, managers will walk past me and ask me if there's anything that I need to do my job better, anything they could do for me. Not just my manager, any manager. And then he said, I also work at Caesar's Palace. And there, the managers walk around and just catch us when we're doing things wrong. There, they're just trying to drive performance. He says, there, I just keep my head below the radar. I just want to get through the day and collect my paycheck. And then he said something magical. But only at the Four Seasons do I feel I can be myself. So think about that for a second. This is the exact same human being, right? In two different jobs. And yet our experience of him will be profoundly different, not because of him, but because of the leadership environment in which he works. In one experience, it'll be amazing. In one, it'll be terrible. Right? And I think so often, I hear this all the time, leaders ask, you know, how do I get the most out of my people? Well, people aren't a towel. You don't wring them out, right? How do I get the most out of them? It's a flawed question when it comes to leadership. The question is how do I create an environment in which my people can work at their natural best? And the Four Seasons has figured that out, right? It's by giving him agency, by giving him control to do the job that he wants to do the way he wants to do it, and checking in to make sure that leadership isn't there to do his job for him or to overly control, but to offer guidelines, but also offer support. And the same goes in any profession. You can take a cop in one agency who will be high performing, valuable member of the team, a valuable member of the community because of the culture. You can change the agency they work for, and they can be a terrible member of the team because of the leadership environment in which they work. Yeah, when we talk about say,
I saw that there was a question, Emily. I will make sure that I give you that link. If you drop your email privately to me, I will send it off to you. So a great, I think, sort of summary about how we can make sure that employees feel that the culture that we build is both a culture of safety as well as showing them how one, we want our clients to view our culture, as well as how we want them to feel engaged with our purpose. So we can't talk about culture without knowing how at the end of the day, we're going to measure that culture. So I want to talk about measuring the culture a bit if I could. And I also want to then talk about some strategies for those of you who are in that third and working in a remote and hybrid. So let's talk about first measuring culture overall. So when you look at measuring culture, one of the things that you can do are annual surveys, annual employee opinion surveys, stay surveys, exit interviews. Those are 3 ways that you can look at measuring culture. Now, an annual survey that may or may not be timely, right? But it is one method. I don't know how many of you are doing stay surveys at the moment, but a stay survey is a critical quiver, if you will, that you have in your tool bag, asking the people in your office, outside of your office right now, what's working for them, what's not working for them, what they like about their job, what they need, what they would like to see less of, what they would like to see more of. You can do it formally, you could do it informally. However you would like to do it, you could do it through your managers, you can have HR go out and do it. It's a wonderful way for you to gather data, especially if you might have some intel that things may not be working the way that you want them to, or even if you have some thoughts or concerns about somebody that might be leaving. Now, at exit interview, that's a great amount of data that you can gather over long periods of time too. But that's after the barn door is closed, right? You've lost somebody. You can get great trends, but you can fix problems after they've happened. And certainly they're useful, but they're only useful after you've lost key people. So I encourage you to do things on the more proactive side. Pulse surveys, immediate, you can do them through time clocks today. You can do them through, cell drops, send something to somebody's cell phones. You can do them through network logins. You can use your HCM technology systems to do them. Email, however you choose to do them. Some employers would choose to do them through HR. If you're doing a full-blown survey, I encourage you to use a third party. People always are more honest when they know that nobody within the organization is going to have any DNA on knowing who provided the data. Retention rates give you a lot of information and data about your culture. If you have positive retention rates, then you might be doing something right. Doesn't mean you definitely are. It means you might be. Performance, overall performance, both of your company, your teams, your departments. Those are all indicators. Absenteeism rates are other ways that you can certainly rate overall culture as well. If you have high absenteeism rates, that means there could be an issue with your culture. And last but not least, certainly one-on-ones. Again, just talking with your leadership, talking to your employees and finding out how things are going. Those are all things that you can do to determine how things are going within your organization. So someone's asked if we have some surveys or templates. I definitely do. And as long as someone is taking those questions down, I can share some of those with you. Did someone share that there's another question in here? We're going to talk about negative people in a moment. So thank you for asking that question. We are going to talk about that. All right, so now I promised you that we're going to spend a few minutes talking about hybrid and remote employees. So this was actually what led me on my journey to here, if you will. I actually thought that hybrid and remote employees was part of what was negatively impacting our culture, and it created a challenge for us within our leadership group. That's what I thought. I went in with a preconceived notion. So I wanted to share with you a couple of models, and I'll share with you the tool where I actually found them in a moment. But for those of you who see this and see something that has been known forever as Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's what I saw when I first looked at this. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about how people have to have certain needs met in life to be able and meet those minimum needs as they move through certain periods, and as they move through, we need basic needs met. We need to eat. Then we need to feel love and affiliation as we move through life before we can actually feel something called self-actualization. So I've just minimized years and years worth of work, but that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So this traditional view of workers starts with workers in the workplace needing a personal connection, moving up to having some personal satisfaction, having some familial working environment needs met, professional satisfaction, social interaction, and then at the top of the pyramid, having met some work-life balance. So that was sort of what we all viewed in the past as the needs of a traditional worker in the workplace. And I would suggest that's probably what I would have believed as well. I think what we've learned as of late in today's world, we've turned that model completely upside down. Today, people want a much larger work-life balance. And then they want social interaction. And then professional satisfaction. And then less on the familial working environment. And then personal satisfaction and personal connection. So we've flipped sort of the paradigm completely upside down to what needs were to what needs are. So we want the ability to manage our own time today versus what we used to want. And this has a huge impact on culture within the workplace, because this new engaged workforce wants and needs something that we may not have provided in the past, and how to provide this has a huge impact on today's leaders and on the values of today's leaders, and certainly has changed the workplace significantly. And if we can't meet these needs, and if we can't meet all of the needs, then you're carving out even more in terms of who can work with and for you. And if you're starting with a smaller slice of the pie to begin with, and now have carved more people out, you have a bigger problem, certainly, than most. So with this as a backdrop, I'm going to ask you to take out your phones one more time. And I'm going to ask you to answer this question. Given how important talent retention is in today's workplace and for driving culture, what strategies have you deployed to create a positive hybrid or remote workforce in your environment? So again, if you can take out your phones and answer this question, tell me about what you've done that you believe is successful for your work environment. So interesting. So some of you have remote options. Some of you have very limited remote options. Some of you are using gamifications. Some of you are using Teams. It appears that flexibility is certainly one of the most responded to answer. There's certainly a good group of you that don't have hybrid at all. Trust, virtual happy hours, one common day. I'm going to assume that's one common day in the office. Check-ins, making your own schedule, limited to administrative staff only. Virtual lunch and learns, weekly check-ins. Some again don't offer remote. Again, we see the teams, we see trust, training. Okay, all great answers. Thank you. You know, it's interesting. I shared with you that for us, I thought too that we had some challenges that were caused by remote and hybrid. And I think I'd shared at the beginning that we had started remote workers probably 15 years ago. And when I went through this process, I realized that we actually didn't have a remote hybrid problem at all. We actually had a problem that was quite different. And our problem was process. Our problem was with the amount of change in the number of people that were now working remote and hybrid. We didn't have the right processes and practice for the number of leaders that were now working remotely. So we always had people working remotely and hybrid, but we didn't have a significant number of leadership working remotely. And that was a game changer for us. So this was one of the tools that I found, again, game changer for us. We had our entire leadership team read this book, and it identified for us that we needed to do things differently as a group, because having remote leaders meant we needed different processes and practices for us to be effective. So again, may or may not be a problem solver for you, but for us, it was one of the things that was negatively impacting our culture. And it was definitely creating for us a negative influence on our culture. So I'm going to quickly move to the chat. So we have some questions, and both are around, there's one in the chat and one in the Q&A about dealing with negativity for performance. So I want to just share with you another tool, if I could, in one moment that'll answer that question. Somebody else asked the question, what is an effective way to communicate the concept that roles should align with passions and capabilities? I'm finding that my company focuses more on correcting weaknesses than building strengths. So it's a great question. Whoever asked that question. So there's a choice, right? Everyone has a choice. You can focus on correcting weaknesses and rather than focusing on strengths. And I will share with you one of the things that we did differently when we went to changing our practices and policies is we eliminated a weekly quality meeting that we would have on Monday mornings that was focused on root cause analysis for quality. And we changed that to a morning 15-minute huddle for our operations group. And that focus was used to have our entire operations group spend 15 minutes together where they got to raise an issue that they needed someone else on the phone to gain a resource from or find support from. So it may sound like a very slight difference, but the difference was looking for opportunities for help rather than focusing on what was wrong. So whoever raised that question, the change was dramatic because people felt that we were looking for support rather than looking for challenges. So I can tell you that we had an entire group of people that felt a lot more positive about the outcome, and it had a dramatic impact on our CRMs, which are client review our open tickets for clients. So that was one of the things that we did differently. And again, I'd be happy to talk to you offline. I did make a commitment to get the survey templates, and I'm going to give you the high performance employee with the hot temper. I have one last tool for you that I'm going to share. So let me just quickly jump to that. And this was one last tool. So I'm going to give you, we have 3 minutes left and we're going to use it very quickly together. I'm going to ask you if you take out your phone for one last minute so you can get this last tool from me. So negativity can quickly kill any culture. How have you managed lack of accountability or negative influencers in your organization? If you would, take your phone for one last moment and share with me something that you've done to help you thwart your negative influencers, or how have you managed lack of accountability? Okay, so a lot of you, big green word, termination. So that means many of you have used termination. So, and some of you have been unsuccessful. Some of you have used performance improvement plans, training. Some have just ignored them. Some say you've just terminated because it's impossible to change personality. True. Action plans, discussions, coaching. Can we help you? Communication, action plans, private conversations, suggestion boxes, conversations. Okay. So in the 1 minute that you have left, policies, not our strong suit. Okay. Follow up. Awesome. So I'm going to share with you one last tool before we summarize, because we did have a lot we were going to do in 1 hour together. I'm going to share with you a very quick read. I thought this was an outstanding book. It's literally 1 hour, 10 minutes. If you listen to it, I listened to it. If you read it, I have no idea how long it is, but it's a 1 hour and 10-minute read on Kindle. QBQ, question behind the question. I know it sounds like what could these two possibly have connected, but it talks about how you get people who are the constant either negative influencers or folks that can't be accountable to your culture, to your organization, to themselves, to your work group, to your environment. It helps you identify both for yourself and as a leader to get others to think through differently the question behind the question. And it starts with you, and it will help you start to help others think about how to get people to eliminate themselves, to practice accountability, both in life and in work. Again, believe me, this is, I'm getting zero residual sales. I just happen to think that this was an amazing book, great find. I'd encourage you to read it. So that's the second tool that I wanted to share with you. In my 10 seconds probably that I have left, I'm going to just summarize quickly. What did we learn from today? We've done a couple of word cloud recaps. We talked about both negativity. We talked about how you view a positive environment. We also talked about some of the tools that you've used for hybrid. We talked about that retention starts with culture. And again, retention's critical in today's environment. You can't make more people today. They don't exist. Culture also continues with leadership. You have to have positive leadership to continue with culture. Your goals, initiatives, and organizational practices are critical. You need the leadership to continue that. Ask, listen, learn, lean in, innovate, empower, and repeat. I thank you very much for joining me today. It was a pleasure. I know somebody wanted something. I'd be happy to get it to you. It was a particular vignette. If you send me your email address, I'd be happy to get it to you. Thank you so much for your time today.